Welcome to the Homeschool Paradigm Podcast. I'm Rachel, and I am here with the founder of Homeschool Paradigm, my mom, Angela.
Hello.
I'll be calling you mom, just to let you know.
I'll be calling you Rachel. We're going to talk about what Rachel used to be like when she was 5, and it was not fun. Did you think it was fun, Rachel, when you were
Yeah, I think it was great.
5? So, do you remember what your 5-year-old self was like?
Yeah, I was like the same. Like
She was 25 in a 5-year-old body.
pretty much. And then I just never got older. That was it.
Or much taller.
Yeah. No, well, so I have an older brother, and he's much easier to do school with.
Much, yes. 5 years older, too. So I had a long time of easy school doing before you
Yeah.
started.
Yeah, he was like good at textbooks and like tests and everything.
Yeah.
And then I just I just don't like being told what to do.
No.
I think that's yeah, which I still don't. But as a kid, I was like, the math sheets are like a textbook, especially like mom could not prove to me that that was important. So there was no like motivation for me to do it. I was like, this makes no sense for me to do. You're telling me to do it, so I'm probably not.
It was rough.
What did you think of what I like? What did you think was important?
Well, I thought that this was impossible, and I started looking for ways to take myself out of the equation. I wanted to find a curriculum that had, like, a video teacher. We tried that. That was
Oh, I
so
remember
boring.
that.
Oh, goodness, that
That
didn't help
was
at all.
worse because then a
It was
video was telling me what to do.
it was worse, it was worse. Um, you can't take yourself out of the equation anyway. I'm sorry. If you're homeschooling, you can't take yourself out of it. So I looked around for a little while for other ways to do it, and then I decided that I would just be your partner instead of your teacher. So I started doing everything with you instead of telling you to do stuff or trying to teach
Yeah.
to you or at you. Um, and it was like a miracle. We sat together and because you really like to do stuff together.
Yeah, I love that. I
In fact,
still
you don't
am
like doing
like,
anything by
I want
yourself.
everyone with me.
Yeah, yeah. And so, really and maybe that's why I don't know if you already felt like that and that's why it worked, or if
Yeah,
you're
it
that way
did for
now
sure.
because so that was kind of miraculous, and I just, like, every day did what you were doing with you together, like, we were just gonna learn it together, whatever it was, and so
Yes.
that turned the whole world around, and then so, obviously, I continued doing that with Rachel has a younger sister and younger brother, and we continued doing that with them too.
That gave me more motivation. Like I felt like you sitting next to me was I just felt cared about, I think. And
Okay.
so that is motivation for me. Like I like being cared about, doing stuff together.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, we're doing math. Like that's something mom wants to do together. It's like I wasn't like thinking of it as like, oh, she's doing my math with me. It was just like,
Right.
oh, it's time for the house to do math.
Exactly.
So I just thought like when she was looking at like like math papers or whatever, math was an especially hard one. Maybe that's why I keep saying math.
Yeah. Math was a
Um,
little bit rough for the
she,
entire household.
she'd just be like doing the problems, and I would be like, oh, she just doesn't know the answer, so she's just doing the problems.
Well, if I made up the problems I didn't know well, I mean, in kindergarten, sure, I know the answer, but
Yeah.
as we went along and if I would make up problems, like, for algebra or whatever, I didn't know the answer, I had to do them.
Which I felt like was good too, because I was, I don't know, like worried about being like I had the older brother who was super smart. So
I mean, he still had trouble with math, though.
Yeah, but he was
You
5 years
couldn't tell.
older.
Yeah.
So I saw like I just was like, oh, he knows everything. I just don't know any of this stuff. So then I'd be like maybe a little bit like, oh, mom's working on this stuff too. Like not everyone older, like she's fine and she has to do this
Oh, that's
schoolwork, so it's
interesting.
fine.
I like that. I don't think I knew that you thought that. We haven't really ever
Yeah.
talked about exactly what we were thinking. Well, you probably know what I was thinking, but we haven't talked about what you were thinking.
Yeah, I feel like I know
Hmm.
what you were thinking. Then I just thought, I don't know, you just had to do it too.
So I asked Sarah this morning what she
My
thought
younger
about it,
sister.
and she was like, "What are you talking about?" Like,
She
what do
thought it
you
was just
mean?
always that way.
It's just what it is. I mean, it was, I guess. It was always that way for her.
Yeah, for her. Hmm.
Well, and then she was like, "Oh, I really needed it." I didn't ask
Yeah.
Sam if he felt like he needed it, but
I
I
was
mean,
a little more independent
it's just what we
worker sometimes.
did, right? Like you wouldn't be, I really needed all that food mom cooked, like like as if it was ever gonna not be there. It was just there.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of just part of
Yeah.
the day.
I really think that that is a big reason why I didn't have stress after a little while. I mean, it was pretty stressful to start
Yeah.
with, but after implementing that, I didn't really have stress. Like we homeschooled for 23 years and there were a lot of years we did not feel that stress. And I think that's probably why, because I was just doing it with you.
Hmm.
It was fun
And
for
it
me.
was like it was part of the day. Like it was just activities we were doing or
Yeah.
like it was just what we were doing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like pressure.
Well, I think a lot of the stress for homeschool moms comes from um, trying to get their kids to do something. And I
Yeah.
really never had to try and get
Nobody
you
likes
guys.
being told what to do.
No, I
I might
know.
be a little
Not
more
just
adamant
Rachel.
about it, but
Well, I never felt like I had to get you to do, I mean, I can't say never, I guess, but like I almost never felt like I had to get you guys to do it because I was doing it. And so you were like, "Oh, well, I'll do it too." Most of the
Mhm.
time your kids will do whatever you're
I
doing.
want to follow you around
Have you
anyway.
noticed? Yeah, they wanna do what you're doing. Sometimes that ends up being a little eye-opening for parents that their kids wanna do what they're doing, but
Yeah.
so I didn't have a lot, there was just not, the stress of arguing with you, trying to get you to do something that I wanted you to do. I was just doing it and you just did it, and sometimes I'd just do
Hmm.
something and then you guys would just join in.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes parents wanna get their kids interested in something, and I like to tell them, "Well, be interested in it yourself in front of them. Make it so interesting."
Yeah, like with reading books, like we read a lot of books out loud growing up. And
Mhm.
so with reading books, when you would like, you'd be like, oh, I want to read this book, so I'm gonna read it to
Yeah.
you.
Right. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so it's like something, and then I would feel like, oh, this book must be interesting. It's something she wants to read.
Yeah, I'm not sure I read any books to myself most of the time we were homeschooling.
I was
I did just do that.
now
I was
looking
like,
back, I'm like,
"Oh,
did she
this book
even want
sounds
to
good. Let's read
read?
it." No, I totally wanted to read, but I wanted to read it out loud. I felt like I wanted to just share it. I didn't wanna
Yeah.
read it myself. How boring is that? Let's read it as a group so we can talk about it and make jokes about it for years to come and quote lines
Yeah.
from
There are still lines
yeah, I can't think
that
of
we
any
all just say.
right
I can't think of any either.
now.
They have to come naturally.
They do. Yeah, and they do a lot. So, yeah, I think that was my biggest stress relief was doing the work together. And, a lot of moms will say, "Oh, I don't have time to do that." And that may be true, but they're spending a lot of time on arguing and trying to get their kids to do stuff. Could be
Yeah.
spending that
Yeah.
time just doing it with
You
them.
spent a lot of time
There's probably
trying to
less time spent if
convince
you just
me.
do Oh my goodness, I spent a lot of time trying to convince you to start with. Yeah, it's hard to convince. I was gonna say little people, but
No.
big people too.
You can't convince a person very easily.
Well, I mean, the best way if you've got something you really wanna convince your kids, you just show them, which is how this works. You show
Yeah.
them that it's worth doing or that it feels good or that it's fun to find out things. So, what do you think you felt like so you said what you felt like when you were really young, and I started that. Did you just still feel that way growing up all through high school, or do you have any idea?
Um, like all the way in high school, I did more stuff independently, and you were
Yeah,
doing more things with Sam and Sarah. You were still doing that more with them than like
okay.
some of the things I was doing, which by that point I feel like I was okay with it. But I think like the
Isn't that
main thing for
funny?
me then,
When I look back, I think we were just all together the whole time. We were doing all the same
oh
things,
yeah, I
but
was sitting in the
probably
same
not.
room.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing for me then was like that I knew that you were always available.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was a big thing. And I think it probably came from like the sitting with me.
Yeah.
Because like you didn't stop sitting with me. Like you didn't stop and you didn't like say, okay, well you're old enough.
You're on your own
Go
now or
over there and
whatever.
do it. I just got out the book kind of on my own time. I was doing like this subject or that. But yeah, by the time I was older, it was like you're available whenever I need you. Or if I was like feeling not motivated and I was like doing science or something, then I'd go to you and talk about what I read or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like it changed a little bit.
I remember when Sarah, I mean, she was 16, and she was doing some biology stuff, and I was just doing dishes. I wasn't,
Hmm.
sitting with her reading her biology, but she was there was some question in the book, and she was supposed to do I think it was classifying some kind of classifying question, and she came in the
Oh
kitchen
yeah.
and stood there and looked at me a minute, and I looked at her, and then she left the room, went back and sat down, and then a few minutes later, she came back in and looked at me, she didn't say anything. Did it 2 or 3 times and so it was like I went in to where she was, and I was like, "What's up?" And she just said she was having trouble, and so I just sat down next to her, and so she read me the thing, and she explained the question, and then she was like, "Oh, I see. I get it." So, and she was able to do it without my help. But, I think that
Yeah.
that is, a big part of it.
Yeah.
She was probably feeling tense and sorta locks up your brain a little bit,
Well,
right?
that's what I was thinking. Like it relieves stress for us as kids to have you having that availability toward us and
Mhm.
the willingness.
Yeah, I'm thinking about myself in school, in public school, if we were supposed to be working on something in class and I didn't understand, I wasn't it was pretty stressful. I wasn't gonna do anything about it. I wasn't gonna go ask the teacher or ask, someone next to me or whatever. I was just gonna
Yeah.
stressfully sit there and try and figure it out and then hope that later I go home and ask my brother or something. But I think I don't want it to feel like that. I never wanted it to feel like that at all at home, where help wasn't
Yeah.
really available or it was just gonna stress you out and lock up your brain. You can't
Yeah.
go
And I
anywhere.
think as an older kid, I wouldn't have understood that. I would have been like, why can't you be available?
Yeah.
It would have not made sense. It would have been like you inducing stress in me. Like
Right.
that's kind
Like
of what
on
I would
purpose.
see that
Why would
as.
I do
Like,
that? Oh my goodness. Yeah.
why are you doing that?
Well, and I think the emotions are the same. Like when you were 5, you were saying you're the same now, you like the same things or whatever.
Hmm.
I just think that, in high school, you would have been able to be like, "Hey, why aren't you around?" But a little younger person just would feel the emotions and not know
Yeah.
what it meant or what thoughts led to that. It's just upsetting. And so then you've
Right.
got stress and tears, which is a double whammy if you're looking for more time in general. Stress takes up a lot of time in the in the brain and in the,
Yeah.
homeschool.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite thing to tell parents to try when they're feeling very stressed and arguing with their
Hmm.
kids and trying to make them do things. Just sit there. Just sit there or I mean, I like to sit there doing the same work, but sometimes just sitting there.
It's mainly just feeling cared about.
Mhm.
All right, we'll see ya.
Thanks for listening.